Hey everybody, hey, it's Dr. Delicia here. Just wanted to come in and just um, share a little bit. Just really happy that it's Friday. It's actually my birthday. Um, so I wanted to come on, especially in light of an event that happened last night. So last night, we were really blessed in our area. We had our first Heal the Healers seminar, and it was hosted by the Florida State University College of Medicine and the Delicia County Medical Society. And it was put on, by our students. We brought in Pamela Wible, who is a friend of mine who speaks widely on physician suicide. And we then had a panel discussion. So I was on the panel discussion, and let me pause and actually introduce myself. So I'm Dr. Delicia Haynes. I'm the founder and CEO of Family First Health Center, board certified in family medicine and obesity medicine. I'm also a medical student mental health advocate. So I shine light for medical students in their darkest hour, helping them overcome stress and depression, which is one of the reasons I come on and I do this show. And so last night we were on the panel discussion. Again, it was myself, Clay Whitman, who is the father of Matt Whitman, who is a second-year Florida State medical student who died by suicide in 2017, and also Sherry, who is a nurse of Dr. Ortiz, who is an amazing spinal surgeon, who also died by suicide in 2017. So we had a presentation kind of followed by us on the panel and just interacting with the audience. And this was I speak a lot on depression and suicide, but this was actually the first time that I've done it live in front of my actual colleagues, in front of the people that, I trained in this area. I trained in Daytona Beach at Halifax. So in the audience were the people who I spent time in their offices as a resident and as a medical student, and who I refer patients to now, and they refer patients to me. And hey, cuz, so it was different than in previous times when I've talked at places where I really didn't know people personally. And at first I got a little bit nervous, and I'm so grateful because Clay Whitman, who again was Matt Whitman's father, is Matt Whitman's father. He actually, for those of you who don't know, I'm in the process of writing a book that's getting toward the finish line, and he read the book, he edited the book, he wrote a foreword for the book, and in reading the book, he got to the part where I'm talking about what I do now to kind of help boost my mood, and one of those things is I always have smells around me that remind me of happy times in my childhood. And so he reached down and he grabbed a cherry chapstick that was wrapped at the time. And so he brought that to me when I was having this moment where I kind of didn't want to go on stage and talk about my personal struggle with depression in front of my colleagues. And so just really grateful to him for that. But it was an amazing event, and I wanted to come on today and just talk about just a few of the takeaways that I had. And one of those is just 3 easy things that we can do to de-stigmatize suicide. By our language, because the way that we talk about things has so much power. And so there are easy things that we can do to really destigmatize suicide. And Pamela Wible shared a lot, and we shared a lot. And these are just a few of those things that really jumped out to me. So much so that when I heard it, I actually emailed my editor, and I was like, we've got to go through the book and make sure that I didn't use these terms. So, again, it was one of the first times that I've been in front of my own colleagues sharing my story, both of, I don't think I went into being suicidal in high school, but I did definitely talk about my struggle with depression in medical school and taking some time off following Matt Whitman's death. That actually is what sprung me into action to start talking about it, because there were just, I knew that there was more that I could do, and I previous to that I'd been afraid to talk about it, and I really got to the point where my love was greater than my fear. And so if there was anything that I could do to help decrease and have one less person write a suicide note, I wanted to make sure that I was doing that. And so really after Matt Whitman died, I contacted Lucky Dunn, the dean of our local medical school, and I said, I want to come in and I want to talk to your students, and you can't be in the room. And luckily we have a relationship where he trusted me with his students, and I went in and I shared my story, and there's just so much power in us sharing our stories. So I want to make sure I mention that, that, you know, one of the greatest gifts you can give to someone is to be vulnerable with them, especially the people that hold you in really high esteem. So in this community, I'm really blessed to enjoy a good reputation as a physician, as a business owner. And so sometimes when people see you in that light, you know, they don't know the backstory, and they just always known you and always see you as a successful person. And so it's very powerful when you share some of the things that you've overcome. And so that was one of the things that I did, you know, then, and I continue to do. But last night was the first time that I did it in front of my actual colleagues. So I was really glad that Clay Whitman was there to kind of, you know, remind me of that my love is greater than my fear, and to help take me back to, you know, my little happy moments when I've got my cherry chapstick, because it reminds me of being in the 3rd grade on the bus when everything was fine, before I had bills and all that. But the 3 things that we can do to help destigmatize destigmatize suicide through our language that Dr. Wible talked about. One of those was to make sure that we're using the term that a person died by suicide or died of suicide instead of committed suicide. And if you use these terms, don't feel bad that you've used them. I've used them in the past. It's, you know, most of the studies that are out there, they use these terms. So, you know, they're the terms that you see, but they really have a very negative connotation. And when you look at what the definition of commit is, and there's more than one, but one is to carry out or perpetuate a mistake, crime, or immoral act. And we know that people who die by suicide aren't criminals. So, you know, to say commit suicide kind of aligns them in that category, which is completely wrong. These individuals need help, and these physicians, you know, we lose 400 physicians to suicide every year, and especially this being my birthday, I just thought about that on this day that I'm celebrating my birthday, that I have a brother or sister in medicine somewhere who this is going to be their last day on the planet. And that really kind of struck home with me, that, you know, whatever I can do to help to stem that tide and help stop that, I want to make sure that I'm doing. And you know, Pamela, when she came out, she talked about these things that we can do to change, you know, our language, and language is so powerful. So rather than saying that someone committed suicide, which is kind of more of like has that criminal connotation, that you say that they died by suicide or they died of suicide. And then the other meaning of commit is to pledge or bind or devote. And we know that people who die by suicide it's not that they're committed to or they're devoted to, you know, suicide, or even that they're devoted to death. For the most part, they just want the pain to end. They want that the struggle to be over. And I remember when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, when I became suicidal, if you had asked me if I was suicidal, I would have said no. I just didn't want the torment that was going on mentally for me to continue. And luckily for me, there was a teacher, Mrs. Bowker, who recognized that I was slipping, and she intervened. Again, you know, there's a lot of power in our language, and so make sure that we're saying died by suicide or died of suicide instead of commit suicide is one thing that we can say. Another thing that we can say is that if someone had an attempted suicide, that we call it an attempted suicide, and we don't call it an unsuccessful suicide. Because if someone, you know, amazing people are continuing to be here with us, then there's nothing unsuccessful about that. We want, these amazing physicians and healers to be here with us. So we want to make sure that we're not using the term unsuccessful suicide, because it's not unsuccessful when someone that we love and that we respect and that brings so much to our communities is still here with us. So we want to make sure that we're using the term attempted suicide instead of unsuccessful suicide. And then on the other side of that, we also want to make sure that if someone has a completed suicide, that we call it a completed suicide and that we don't call it a successful suicide. And then again, if you've used this terminology in the past, don't feel bad. It's what's been out there. In 2007, I did a grand rounds presentation on suicide and depression amongst physicians. And when I was going through my slide deck from that, it was peppered with these terms because that's the terms that were used in the media, that were used in studies. But they're really, they're inaccurate and they're unhelpful. And I was just really happy that Dr. Wible brought these, things to the attention. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned them. So again, when someone has a completed suicide, you want to make sure that you're talking about it as being a completed suicide and not being a successful suicide, because there is nothing successful about losing 400 physicians to suicide every year, which is the equivalent of entire medical school. If you imagine that an entire medical school is suddenly wiped off. There's nothing successful about that, and we want to make sure that we're using proper terms that help to kind of destigmatize suicide itself, and that we continue to talk about our friends and our loved ones that we've lost because of suicide. Just because someone dies from suicide, it doesn't take away from their legacy. They still have an amazing legacy. It doesn't take away from who they were. And oftentimes when someone dies of suicide, we just stop talking about them altogether. One of the questions that came up last night from one of my friends and physicians was they couldn't think of anyone who had died by suicide in our area. And but in actuality, it wasn't that it hadn't happened, it's that we don't talk about it. And so it's important that we honor people, regardless of how they die, because there's all of the individuals that we honored last night who did die by suicide have an amazing legacy, were amazing people. They were sharing a story about Dr. Ortiz, who was a spinal surgeon, and there were potholes at his hospital, and he was trying to get the administration to fix them, and they never did. But he had a background in construction before he went into medicine, so he just went to the store one day and got whatever stuff you would get to fix potholes, and he fixed them himself, and then went and did a full day of surgery. So it just tells you how much care and how amazing these people are. So we want to make sure that we're using proper terminology, and we want to make sure that we continue to honor them and their legacy and their work. So really that's what I just wanted to come on and say tonight. So I hope you guys had an amazing week. Again, my name is Dr. Delicia Haynes. I'm the founder and CEO of Family First Health Center, board certified physician, and a medical student mental health advocate. I shine a light for medical students in their darkest hour, helping them overcome stress and depression. And you can follow me across social media at Dr. Delicia MD. That's DrDelicia MD. Take care.